Good morning. Okay, Evelani, you let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead, Chair.
Okay. Oh, aloha mai kako. My name is Dawn Chang. I am the chairperson of the Commission on Water Resource Management. This is April 1st, not an April Fool's Day joke, but you're actually here for a Water Commission meeting. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go over some public meeting protocols before we start our formal meeting. We're holding this meeting as a hybrid meeting. Some of us, actually all of us, are here in person in the DLNR boardroom of the Kalani Moku building in Honolulu. But we are also holding this meeting remotely via Zoom, and it can be watched live on YouTube. For those here to testify on Zoom, we will let you into the meeting when we hear the item you wish to testify on. Please remember to mute your YouTube when you are in the main Zoom meeting room, or we will get an echo. When you enter, please be sure to keep your camera off and microphone muted until the commission calls on you for public testimony. We ask that members of the public testifying on agenda items be mindful of everyone and limit your testimony to 3 minutes so that we can get to everyone. Please do not use the chat box for any comments because that presents a sunshine issue. People may also testify via telephone at the number posted online. Please let the commission secretary, Evelani, know your name and what agenda item you wish to testify on so we can call you for that item. You can email your testimony to evelani.hr.ka'a@hawaii.gov or dlnr.cworm@hawaii.gov. For all meeting participants, I would like to stress the importance of speaking slowly, clearly, and if you come up to the table, as close to the microphone as possible. Before speaking, please state your name and identify yourself for the record. I am now going to read the standard contested case statement. In some of the matters before the commission, a person may wish to request a contested case hearing. If such a request is made before the commission's decision, then the commission will consider the request before considering the merits of the item before it. A person who wants a contested case may also wait until the commission decides the issue, then request the contested case after the decision, but before the close of the commission meeting. Any request must also be made in writing within 10 calendar days. If no request for contested case hearing is made, the commission will make a decision, and the commission will treat the decision as final and proceed accordingly. In addition, the commission may go into executive session pursuant to HRS 92-5A4 in order to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the commission's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities. I am now going to take roll call of all the commissioners. Please state your name. And I don't think anybody is participating remotely. So we'll start with Commissioner Miiki.
Not here.
It is going to be a nice, fun day today.
April Fool. Paul Meyer.
All right,
Wayne Katayama, present.
thank you. Don Chang, Chair of the Commission.
Aurora Kagawa Viviani. Kathleen Ho.
And unfortunately, our new commissioner, Hannah Springer, is not able to join us today. So we have 6 members today. I'd also like to introduce our staff, Kira Kahahane, First Deputy to the Commission on Water Resource Management. Evelani Ka'a is our Board Commission Secretary, and our Deputy Attorney General today is Cindy Young. So mahalo everyone for being here. My understanding is generally we will take the agenda items in the order that they've been agendized. However, my understanding is we are taking item B1 out of order. But the first item on the agenda is item B1.
Yes.
I was looking for minutes, but we don't have minutes. Okay.
No minutes this
Okay.
one, Chair.
All right, thank you.
Evelani, were you gonna pull up the presentation? Okay, so for this is a briefing only. And this is, I think, the first time that this has really been discussed publicly, so I anticipate a lot of good discussion today. CWIRM staff are proposing to create an adaptive management plan to protect groundwater and the ecosystems that it supports, including traditional and customary practices that depend on those ecosystems within the Keauhou aquifer sector. Next slide. So the purpose of this plan. Next slide, if can. Of course, groundwater is a critical public trust resource. It feeds springs and fish ponds, alkaline pools, and reefs. Cultural practices rely on those systems and those resources. Development pressure statewide is increasing, including within the Keauhou area. And that makes sustainable groundwater management more important than ever. Any housing and economic growth will need groundwater as well. So why Keauhou? Yeah. Well, of course, this, the history of the Keauhou aquifer sector includes notably the 2017 petition for designation as a groundwater management area. That petition was denied by the commission with conditions attached. There remains a continued interest in development in this area. The area is also home to Kalokohonokohau National Historic Park and the unique ecosystems contained therein. Keauhou has been identified as an aquifer system area in need of a more detailed assessment. So, next slide. The Commission's public trust responsibilities. Of course, there are 4 public trust purposes that the Commission is responsible for protecting: maintenance of waters in their natural state, traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians, including appurtenant rights, adequate reserves of water for Hawaiian homelands, and domestic use, particularly drinking water. Within the Water Code, there is a section that specifically contemplates the protection and requires the protection of Native Hawaiian water rights and the rights of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And the Commission has the affirmative duty to take the public trust into account in the planning and allocation of water resources and to protect public trust uses whenever feasible. Feasible in this context includes the needs to balance benefits and cost. In balancing public trust uses, the Commission has the responsibility to promote reasonable and beneficial use of water resources to maximize their social and economic benefits to the people of this state. At the same time, maximum use does not mean maximum consumptive use. It means the most equitable, reasonable, and beneficial allocation of state water resources. And resource protection can also constitute use. Okay, next slide. The primary way that the Commission plans regarding groundwater is through sustainable yield. Sustainable yield is defined by the Water Code as the maximum rate at which water may be withdrawn from a water source without impairing the utility or quality of the water source as determined by the Commission. Sustainable yields are set in the Water Resource Protection Plan by Commission staff. And like in-stream flow standards, sustainable yields guide water planning and regulation by prescribing responsible limits to the development and use of public water resources. Next slide. The current sustainable yield for Keauhou is 38 million gallons per day. Staff is evaluating if and how forecasted rainfall combined with possible different methodologies for determining sustainable yield may impact the current sustainable yield. And we're also entertaining approaches to the management of different aquifer bodies. There are potentially 3 or more that we know of. The basal lens, the dike confined, or maybe confined by some other structure such as faults or layers of ash. We're not really sure, but that's the high level, and the deep confined aquifer, which resides somewhere underneath.
Can I ask a question? The
Yes.
38 million applies to the basal,
It currently applies, they're not broken out.
so it's across all 3, but we don't know what the deep confined is.
Yes, yes. And We are looking into further study of this for sure, but it's going to take at least 2 or 3 years.
You know,
to really
historically,
figure out.
how we arrived at the 38 million.
I think staff would better be able to speak to that. Yeah, I can definitely request that staff give a presentation on how we arrived at that figure.
If I can add, I mean, that number sort of makes assumptions about the geology that may or may not be applicable on different islands sort of settings. So I think that's where, anyways, I just want to add
Yes,
that.
it does. Yes,
I
it
just
does.
have the question because there are 3 aquifers there.
Mm.
And we don't know if they're connected or not, and all that stuff. So I just was wondering how 38 million. So it came from outdated methodology when I used to be in the commission.
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
That was a long time ago too.
Yeah, Karen, when you say the dike confined high level,
Mhm.
it's my understanding it's there may be separate pieces there, but what elevation are those?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
Do you have the map?
Yeah.
Which
Not by the
Ivalani,
upper.
do you have
Yeah.
the,
Which
do the 8.5 by 11 one?
by like the upper road.
Yeah,
Yes.
you see
Highway.
the,
Mama.
you
No,
see
that
the
percent.
sort of dash line,
Mhm.
the vertical line? Yeah, that's what we could, estimate to be the
Gotcha.
area that impounds water at a higher level. I don't know what the ground elevation is, but
Okay. I always wish for a big MRI machine or something.
yeah, wouldn't that be great?
Thank you.
Yes, and we're interested in developing a more complex model to tease out some of these interactions.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide. So, of course, a seminal case, Kapakaio Ka'aina v. Land Use Commission. The state action involved in that case was a land use boundary amendment, and the issue was the impacts of the action on traditional gathering practices. So, in that case, the court found that to fulfill its constitutional duty under Article 12, Section 7 of the Hawaii Constitution to preserve and protect customary and traditional Native Hawaiian rights to the extent feasible, the LUC must, at a minimum, make specific findings and conditions as to these 3 elements here. The identity and scope of valued cultural, historical, or natural resources in the petition area, including the extent to which traditional and customary Native Hawaiian rights are exercised in the petition area, the extent to which those resources, including traditional and customary Native Hawaiian rights, will be affected or impaired by the proposed action, and the feasible action, if any, to be taken by the Land Use Commission to reasonably protect Native Hawaiian rights if they are found to exist. And this analytical framework was provided by the court in an effort to effectuate the state's obligation to protect Native Hawaiian customary and traditional practices while reasonably accommodating competing private interests. A difficult balancing act, to be sure. So next slide. This is the process as you know, it's currently been applied. A 3-step process beginning with identifying, then assessing impacts, then implementing feasible protections. Next slide, please. However, Kapaka'i has been applied in various contexts since that first case. Recently, in the Hawaii Supreme Court decision, Flores case, Ohana v. University of Hawaii, it was applied in a administrative rulemaking context. And in that case, the court emphasized that these broad-ranging protections are flexible and must be adapted to the particular context or situation where they're implicated. And so, you know, well, I'll get to that later. Next slide, please. So in the groundwater context is a little different than a land use boundary amendment. We have certain challenges with managing groundwater that are unique. It's been less studied than surface water. Much about it is unseen and not well understood. There's a need for more data, a giant MRI machine, perhaps, a deep monitor well, perhaps, into the deep confined. There is known to be interconnection between the basal and the high level and the deep confined, but we're not sure where those interconnections are exactly, or how they interact with each other. We're not sure about the location where these various aquifer bodies may discharge in the nearshore and offshore environments, though research has been developing to try to arrive at some conclusions about that. There are both localized and regional impacts from groundwater withdrawals, and there are cumulative impacts of groundwater withdrawals as well. Another challenge with managing groundwater is that you see lagging impacts of withdrawals. You know, a withdrawal one day may not create an impact at the coastline until months or years from the withdrawal's occurrence. And so these all make groundwater particularly difficult to manage. And so we need to find some creative solutions. Next slide, please. This is, I pulled this from a scientific investigations report back in 2021 by the US Geological Survey. It focused on the withdrawal of water and groundwater discharge within the area of Kalokohonokohau National Historic Park on Hawaii Island. And these are just 3 possible depictions of what could be going on with the deep confined aquifer. So you can see on the first, you know, perhaps there is coastal confined groundwater that discharges directly to the ocean. Perhaps it does not discharge directly to the ocean, even though the confining units themselves extend to the ocean, or perhaps it does not discharge directly to the ocean because the confining units do not extend to the ocean. So these, you know, it's uncertain what is actually going on down there, but those are some potential depictions of what it could be. Next slide, please. So the limitations of the way that we currently calculate sustainable yield. We use the robust analytical model, which the shortcomings of or the assumptions of have been much discussed and documented. This doesn't account for spatial variations in pumping. As Commissioner Kagawa Viviani mentioned, it assumes uniform geology. It allows approximately 50% of recharge to emerge at the coast as discharge, but it does not specifically address groundwater-dependent ecosystems or GDEs. Clearly, there is a need for better modeling and incorporation of GDEs and traditional and customary practices into sustainable yields. And ultimately, the goal of RAM is to maximize water withdrawals and prevent saltwater intrusion. It looks at how much water can be extracted from the aquifer. By contrast, our in-stream flow standards, which are sort of the other side of the coin from a sustainable yield in the surface water context, start by looking at how much water should remain in stream. So there's a bit of a dichotomy between sustainable yield and in-stream flow standards, even though they are sort of analogs of each other, theoretically at least. So sustainable yield, though it's Seaworm's primary tool for protecting groundwater, it does have its limitations for sure. And that is why we are proposing, next slide, to counter these limitations in the specific context of groundwater, continued monitoring and feedback are a promising path forward. This is intended to help Seaworm carry out the intent of the Kapakai test as adapted to suit our constitutional duty over water resources. And so the theory behind what we're proposing is to make that line that I showed earlier into a circle where we're continually assessing the impacts, what can be done to feasibly protect traditional and customary practices, and coming back around again, continually identifying and learning more about our resources. So next slide, please. The AMP goals and process. Next slide. So here are the needs that we've identified. We need to update the Commission's understanding of resources based on the current research. We need to protect valued cultural and ecological resources. We need to balance the protection of groundwater resources with their development and use, and base those management decisions on real data. And we need to continue to learn and improve, because with the nature of groundwater, there's so much that we don't know. We need to continue to learn. We need to continue to reassess our management strategies in light of the most current data and research. So next slide, please. So we're proposing this path forward through adaptive management. The basic goals of adaptive management are to monitor, respond, and revise continually. Instead of fixed assumptions, management will adjust based on real data and on changing conditions, and it will be supported by both scientific and cultural indicators. Next slide. Here are our goals. As part of the adaptive management planning process, to identify significant landscapes, key indicators, monitoring needs, including perhaps deep monitor wells, other factors that may affect those indicators, to set triggers for action that are tied to ecological and cultural thresholds, and to implement pre-agreed management actions such as reducing pumping if impacts are seen. Increased monitoring, I'll note, also supports one of the conditions for non-designation of the Keauhou Aquifer, which is to encourage new private wells in Kaloko, Honokohau 1 through 3, or Kealakehe to include deep monitor wells. So increased monitoring will support one of the 8 conditions for non-designation. Next slide, please. Other goals. Under adaptive management planning, we need to allocate the cost of monitoring and management, and we need to do so equitably. We're looking at a regional focus for this plan. There was a plan that was being worked on by commission staff and the National Park Service from a few years ago that looked at the Kaloko Honokohau National Historic Park specifically. We're proposing to expand the scope of that to the Keauhou region to incorporate a more holistic focus and look outside of the park as well, including, within the park itself. That plan is going to be heavily informing this regional plan. So we don't want to throw that work that was done away. We just want to expand on it. Of course, we're contemplating an iterative process. So this first draft will not be the only draft. We intend to continue coming back and incorporating more updated information and research. This means a long-term commitment to monitoring and management, which is going to require funding. I'll just plug that there's a bill being heard, SB 1602, that would give us funding for a Keauhou monitoring pilot project. If that bill doesn't go through, we'll have to find other solutions. We'll have to find other sources of funding for this. And one of the other goals, a major goal of the adaptive management process, is stakeholder involvement and engagement. And that means across the board with all involved interests and stakeholders. Next slide, please. So the process will be the planning and outlining of the adaptive management plan components, assembly of an advisory panel and expert groups in different focus areas, including traditional and customary practices, hydrology, hydrology. Well, I'll get to those 4 focus groups later during the questions portion. The public presentation of drafts so that everyone from the community has an opportunity to see the draft and weigh in. Incorporate commission approval when the draft is ready. And again, continued updates based on what we learn about the system. Okay, next slide. So what this is enabling is stronger protections for ecological and cultural resources, a better roadmap for forward movement, more accurate permitting decisions, and carrying the commission's affirmative duty to protect the public trust. And we're hoping that this will be a possible model for future adaptive management statewide. Keauhou is a notable region in need of management, but it is certainly not the only region. And so this is, in a way, a pilot project to see what lessons we can learn from this experience and how we can better manage groundwater resources across our jurisdiction. Okay, next slide. So for future updates, we would like to identify assumptions and gaps in our knowledge. Ultimately, the adaptive management planning process is a bit like testing a hypothesis. We may be making assumptions, but we should be coming back and continually testing to see if those assumptions are true. We want to incorporate new research and data as it comes up and to provide a method to share that data with the public. It could be as simple as a dashboard to look at, how are we doing on salinity and temperature with these resources? So with that, next slide, please. There's just one more thing that I wanted to to comment on, actually a couple of things. So I have reviewed the testimony, and we have a consultant, Peter Adler of Guild Consulting, to help facilitate the advisory panels and the expert focus groups. Our current funding for this project is about 149,000. That's federal money that we're getting. And that needs to be spent by September 30th. So we may get more funding after September 30th, but that's uncertain. And so we can extend the timeline and the scope of this project somewhat. We can pay it out of our operating budget. We can seek outside funding. But I just wanted to note that it's likely that, you know, we need to move on this plan, at least the first draft, expeditiously in order to make sure that we're able to spend down that funding by September 30th and make the most of what we have available. But we are intending to make a long-term commitment to this plan. I've seen that there's a request for an action item to be brought on this plan, and I do think that's a good idea. So our first phase for this plan contemplates the preparation of a more robust project description, assembling a list of members of the advisory panel and expert groups, creating a plan for the role of the advisory panel and for meetings with both the panel and the experts, identifying an outside expert on adaptive management planning who will brief the advisory panel on adaptive management planning and review the work product before submission, prepare a preliminary outline of elements to be included in the AMP, more specific than what I just presented, to be reviewed by that outside expert, and to begin preparing a reasonable set of literature references to be attached to the draft adaptive management plan. So I would propose that we come back in May or perhaps later for review and approval of these items so that the commission and the public have the opportunity to weigh in. So with that, I'm sure there are questions.
Larry.
Several comments. One is that way back in about 2013, I suggested to the National Park Service that they seek designation of a water management area. And just to push the commission to claim that their springs on their property was in existing use. Now the commission turned down the designation. And I think that's a mistake because right now we're in a muddled state. What authority does the commission have in a common law area? I mean, the common law is mostly about overlying landowners and their competing interests, and they can challenge each other. The way that this thing's going, I think one of the submittals was that we're behaving as though this is a water management area. So one of the things we need clarification is exactly that. Second is that in the Kapaakai analysis, I think in Kauai Springs, it said that we can't say it, oh, we don't know. We have to affirmatively develop some information. But we can't develop information in this odor well thing until we do some testing. I know there are objections to even going forward with the well construction permit. But how can we meet the Kapaakai analysis if we don't have any information beyond what the current hypothetical situation is? And I have a lot more stuff to talk about, but I'll shut up right now.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Sure, yeah, I'll answer the first question. So I take your point, I do. The Hawaii Supreme Court has recognized that, you know, even outside of water management areas, there is an overlying public trust obligation. And so there are no vested rights in the public trust resource to the detriment of public trust.
I need to also say that there also, in Waiole case, we said that there was a categorical imperative to protect the resource, and the Supreme Court said no. They said that there are no absolute priorities even among public trust purposes. And then they sort of punted and said that we had to do it on a case-by-case basis, including other uses other than public trust resources, but they're going to have the last word. And every time we tried to done something, they said you got it wrong. So, you know, we're stuck in that. But the main point is that it is not correct to say that we protect public trust purposes no matter what. We got to decide what's the relative importance of things.
Absolutely. It is a balancing act for sure. Yes. Regarding your second question about the need for testing before we can make a decision about Kapakai. Absolutely. That's sort of what we're trying to do here with the adaptive management planning process. We need to make decisions based on the data that we have now, but we also need more data to inform better decision making. And so that's why I'm proposing to turn this sort of from a line into a circle so that we're continually learning more about the resource. It's also why we have structured this the way that we have with the construction permit sort of being the bread in the sandwich here, with the adaptive management plan being in the middle before we bridge to the pump installation permit. And I know that there are objections to how that's being proposed, but we recognize that there is the need for testing. And if this well is eventually going to withdraw water, maybe one day, we need to be able to test its actual impacts. There's numerical modeling is useful, but we would like some practical information about the impacts of the well.
So I also want to add, it's not that there's no data or no information. And I'm gonna preface my comments with like, and I know this is about the AMP and not Ottawell, but one of the things that came up in April 2024 is that I didn't think we as a commission had done a good job of including in the record what knowledge there was existing, even if it wasn't collected directly by commission staff. So, we sort of tried to buy some time to do that homework. And so I'm kind of appreciative it's a little bit better articulated here rather than just like a lit review, a more sort of deliberate process on how to take the existing information, gather new information, and then translate that into actionable steps. Because I'm an academic, you can study anything to death, right? You don't need paralysis by analysis, but we do need to have a process for incorporating that. And it's, the challenge here is that it's like the kind of information that we need to make an informed decision is different. Like, it's not what we're used to. It's a groundwater system. We don't measure it well. There's newer ways to do so. I think there's easier ways and harder ways. There's cheaper ways and more expensive ways. And if we can be like really strategic in how to figure out how to stretch the resources we have to get that, I think overall it'll be helpful. But yeah, I had to go back and look at those 8 conditions. And I think one of the things we fall short on is that very first condition with consultation and understanding. What was it? With that consultation, it was it was lacking in April 2024. With input from Ahamoku and DHHL. So I think this sort of could help us as there are more permits coming in for Keauhou to have a structured process for that, so we don't have to be reinventing every single time. But yeah, that was my comments. I appreciate the presentation and being walked through like why and what.
Commissioners, any other questions by staff? I know there may be, did you want to have Peter also come up and do a presentation, or he's available for questions?
He's available for
Okay,
questions, yes, if you have.
okay. But there may be others. Okay.
Would you
Any
like
other
to come up?
questions?
Happy to come up and answer any questions I can.
Any questions for Peter?
Maybe some background, Peter, because I know you also worked on the previous project. If you can provide us some.
Aloha commissioners.
Aloha.
Yeah, this, for me, this current work with Kira and Ryan and Katie and Neil, it grows out of the 2017 symposium, which had quite an extensive record. Not everything was correct. We've got some corrections, but it's a pretty good example of the several days of intensive discussions that went on, including site visits. The pertinent piece at this moment is really looking at what the Native Hawaiians said at the start, but also at the indicators that were developed at the very last session. And this is a sort of a jump off from that portion for me. So I'm looking forward to diving into this. We're in the deep end of the pool. We'll get in there as fast as we can. It's, we actually haven't even started officially yet, so, and constrained by budget and time frame. But my colleague Stephanie Sang, who's a project assistant on this, we're gonna work pretty fast and pretty hard to get it all done. I'm happy to answer questions,
Thank you.
unless they're too hard.
No, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Peter?
Yeah, so so there's a gap between that symposium and where we are now. And so I have passed you what information I have. There's literature that has been published and literature that remains as student theses that are, you know, not as visible. There's also testimony from every single, I think, meeting that has been, for me, very informative, because a lot of these, especially with regards to traditional and customary practices, they're not documented in really public ways, right? For good reason. Who shares their fishing spots? So like, yeah, I hope you sort of fold that in, and you know, that testimony for me was very
I'm really
important.
looking forward to your help on that. And what we're gonna have to do, I know there's a lot of good material and new research that's been done. And what we would want to do is figure out what is most salient to this effort, because lots of stuff. And we're looking at that. We're gonna look at as much of that as we can.
Yeah.
So what rises up to the top?
Yeah.
Data wise.
Yeah, and data being like qualitative information
Absolutely,
as well as
absolutely.
quantitative, yeah.
Any other questions? I think my comment is more like a process on Kapa'akai. In my view, the obligation to do Kapa'akai is the applicant. But what I see with the AMP is this is being initiated by CMARM. So we're looking at a much broader regional approach, and we're looking at trying to take in more information, more data collection. So I'm really comfortable. I do think that there is a need to be more inclusive. And I'm hoping we build upon some of the information that Aurora talked about. You know, sometimes we get consultation fatigue. We go to the same people over and over again, and they get kind of tired, like, I already told you. So, I mean, we have to find a better way of documenting and memorializing, so that we're not having to go back and revisit. But when we do, but I'm also of the view that, in my view, under the court cases regarding Kapa'akai traditional customary practices, once we get into a permit, that obligation is shifted to the applicant to provide us specific information on that specific application. Because in my view, Kapa'akai is very, you know, traditional customary practices are specific to the place. So you have to have a connection to the place, and I do expect, so that is the applicant's burden. And what I'd like to see in the submittals is, because sometimes we all don't have the benefit of what that engagement process is. So that when we do have an application that comes before us, that analysis does include the consultation process. So we know, we can feel some level of comfort that there's been a genuine engagement process. I think we can no longer just talk about checking off the boxes, but so I see the AMP as being sort of this much broader umbrella that will apply, again, on a regional basis, good data collection, good collection of information, even cultural information that, because again, an application is very site specific, but generally when we look at Kapa'akai, it's what happened in that ahupua'a. And in my view, I think some of the historic, because we don't know enough about what's happening subsurface, but if the practices confirm that people crossed over ahupua'a, that probably signals that there's some interconnection between the resources. And I think that that's going to come out in some of the kind of consultation process. But because I do think we rely too much, I think, on Western methodology, which is, but I think if we look back at the indigenous knowledge from that place, it can help us inform what were the dynamics of the cultural practices that, they relied upon the resources. If in Wanahopa you didn't have something, but yet we know that there's, perhaps water that flowed someplace else. I do think that historical information will be very helpful when we look at applying the scientific information about either reaffirming what we may scientifically know, confirmed by some of that historical documentation. So I think this regional approach is very helpful when we move into the specific permit applications, because that can help us inform what does the regional information provide us when we look at a specific application.
Chair, given the constraints that we're working under for this of timing and deadline and funding, the approach we're thinking about in discussion with Kira and others is, and our staff, is thinking of this as a very first generation plan that can be grown in second and third generations with more data, more consultation. We may not be able to get everything done in this. I just encourage reasonable expectations of what can be done.
And you and I always know about managing expectations. So I do appreciate that. But I think what I saw, and I appreciated Kira's, it is circular. We generally have been looking at Kapa'akai as being sort of this, horizontal, there's the beginning and an end. But clearly it feeds into the more information we know, the better assessment, the better, mitigation we can come up with. So while I totally recognize this is the first generation, but this is going to be, as Kira indicated, an iterative process that as we get more information, I am anticipating that once we get to that last, because this is just the beginning of development. I know everybody is biting at the bit to develop Puana Keho. And unless we get this first one right, so I'm hoping that what you can come up in this process are a lot of tools that will help us replicate as we move forward. Both consultation tools, but scientific tools, and but it also will help us identify where are the gaps, what don't we know, and so there's assumptions that we're going to start off with, and as you move forward, there's going to be recommendations about, okay, these are the gap areas that we're going to have to be cognizant of as we start looking at different, decision makings on various permits, or whether, in my view, we may end up at the end of this, even after the AMP, deciding we should designate Keho. That may be the outcome of all of this, is that, it does appear that at different stages, there's been recommendations to designate Keho as a water management area. Maybe that becomes one of the consequences of this, this AMP. It just, it either supports or becomes a rationale. We'll see.
We've got our running shoes on.
I know, it's an ambitious schedule you've got.
Terrible.
Okay. And yes, Larry.
My understanding of Kapa'akai is that it's our responsibility, not the applicant.
No, and I apologize, you are right. But the applicant has a responsibility to provide us the information for us to, so the applicant better come in with some good facts. Otherwise, in my view, we cannot fulfill our constitutional obligation.
All I'm saying is that, they have, I think they have the obligation to say what public trust resources are, not resources, but purposes are out there. But then it's up to us to decide what can be done about it and what's feasible. Feasible means, as the Supreme Court has defined, a cost and benefit analysis, not just because it can be done, it has to be done.
It is a balance, you're right, you're right. So, yeah, no, I do stand corrected. Well, I believe the applicant's obligation is to provide us information upon which the commission then fulfills its constitutional obligation.
One last comment is that, I brought up the issue about, common law overruling in this area versus the code on the water management. However, from what I understand about the public trust, duties of us, it overrides any particular legislation or law. So, but I still am unclear about how much of that we can impose on a common law area, and just in terms of the remedies that we put on it. I'm sure that'll be, we're
Litigated.
probably gonna go to contested case on these things. But by the way, I just want to remind the commission that however we set the sustainable yield, it's not an appealable decision. Right? The interim midstream standards are because we're balancing interest, but it's already been decided that as far as sustainable yield, it's whatever we decide it is.
Couple of thoughts, just having served. One thing I noticed, with the Kapaka is, there's this debate on whose job it is, and also repeatedly I have seen, and I almost went into environmental engineering industry, the way it works is like the person who pays for the work actually gets a lot of control over what gets put into that final report. So when I'm on the commission kind of reading the application, I'm thinking, wow, sometimes the permit applicant has a vested interest in not including some information, and we need to have enough knowledge to correct that. And oftentimes I think we don't, I don't know this area that well. And so I appreciate, I think the idea of this AMP is giving us the tools to evaluate these statements versus saying the applicant said this, thus there's no effect. And I'm thinking, well, that doesn't really follow. So yeah, I'm kind of, excited to see how this works. The other thing I have a question for you is, Kira, when I was reading about the whole aspect of triggers, it reminds me of water shortage planning. And so how do you see this informing maybe regional water shortage planning, which we've actually done really maybe poorly with on the commission? As identifying those triggers. I mean, it's not a water shortage plan, but have you thought about how it could help shape people's regional planning efforts?
I'll confess I have not really thought about how it could inform water shortage planning. I mean, most of our water shortage planning criteria currently are directed towards groundwater, but they are broad, shall we say. And I think they're in need of some updating. So this exercise may give us some more information about groundwater, its interaction with pumping, its interaction with rainfall, that we're then able to use to better define our criteria for water shortage and how we plan to address water shortages.
Yeah, I know it's out of scope, but I'll just say from Red Hill and think about Pearl Harbor water shortage plan and what it did and didn't incorporate. I think there's a lot to be maybe thought about and learned in terms of, the wells look okay in Pearl Harbor, but spring flow has been declining for a long time. And so different metrics sort of have different sensitivities. And then we had absolutely no consideration of how to do contamination metrics. So maybe AMP is a way to sort of run those scenarios of if in the scoping efforts there are, I hear Kathy Ho has a side, but if there are concerns that arise at some point in stakeholder engagement, putting a pin in those and being okay, those are things people care about, and those are the things we should have some framework for considering, and a workflow, because the commission doesn't look at water quality, but DOH does. And I have no idea if it's a concern in the area, but it is, note it somewhere and have it as something that future commissioners and staff who may not be, who likely won't be the same people can take into account, so.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that, and I like the concept of the regional AMP. And identify, it could also be used as a tool to identify potential issues as a footnote or something, so that we can look at it when we're reviewing permit applications and other things. Or even the Department of Health can look at this document and see, and, you know, and assist in determination of water shortage and things like that. I mean, it is really, you know, the whole concept of one water, right? So.
And maybe this is a question for Aurora, but I'm wondering if, because you know, on one, I think that how can we be efficient with different modeling techniques that may be existing or in process? So I think of the Red Hill, and we have the University of Hawaii doing a modeling of the groundwater. Yes, so I mean, is that in any way, do you know, is it of some mature development that it can be used for us to have a good in some way can, and I know the geology is different. I mean, or it could be, I'm not assuming that all geology is the same, but are there sufficient, you know, maybe modeling methodologies that they're using at the UH for Red Hill that can be otherwise instructive to modeling, you know?
So I think, I guess I've been telling Kira, like, sometimes there's that parable of the blind monks and the elephant, and everybody knows sort of what they know, or if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you're a modeler, you think that you need to model it, but honestly, what I think is important, the geologists will call it is a conceptual site model. You have a conceptual understanding of how the system works, but I am personally, I'm a field empiricist. I take data in the field, I measure things with sensors, so that's my bias. And I think there's ways you can take forever to get a model right, and even modelers will say all models are wrong, but some are useful. So you want useful, like you want, and I think fundamentally the big challenge is okay, RAM is based on an assumption that the geology is like Oahu, but Hawaii Island geology is different. So we have to have a conceptual model of, you know, and it's not going to be perfect because you don't have that MRI. But you have a conceptual understanding, and it's backed up by some data of sampling of like, okay, you know, there's this connectivity between high level and the deep confined, but the basal is maybe smaller. And in an exchange with a geologist, you know, he thought it would mean a decrease in the sustainable yield for the basal, but what that means for the others, I don't know. And that needs to be kind of thought about carefully, because maybe in my mind, I'm like, well, is that water like feeding springs, or is it completely bypassing? You know, is that water feeding like the deep water fisheries off Kona, or is it, you know, like, and you're going to take forever to figure that out. But I think as long as you have like a system, I mean, we'll call it monitoring, practitioners will call it kilo, of like close observation, and then be like, hey, something's weird. I think it might be connected. You have a mental model of what you think is happening. You can then say, okay, like, what if we change this activity? You can watch what happens and be like, okay, well, maybe my assumptions about the connectivity are wrong, or maybe they're right. And that's where the adaptive part comes in, but you have to know where to watch, like, right? And what to look for and where, and that means you have to have a better conceptual understanding of. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think you could spend a lot of money and time on modeling.
So for me, that's sort of the concern is we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of time. Can we build upon whether it's modeling techniques? But I also know that Don Thomas, I think they've been looking at, I remember sitting in a presentation that his team put together. So I'm hoping that part of this exercise is building a bibliography or inventory of all available resources and information, and then sort of identifying what are the gaps And then, how do we fill those pukas up? But I'm also, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, or I want to maybe refine the wheel depending upon what we do know about the geology. So I am not a scientist. I'm just a process person, and I'm an administrator that we don't have enough money, we don't have enough time.
Yeah.
So how do we do this more efficiently if we can build upon some existing information?
I think that's a good question. One thing, I'm
Mm.
trained as a hydrologist and ecologist, and there's oftentimes an obsession with the hydrology that doesn't connect to the ecology and then the users, the
Yeah,
people
yeah,
who
yeah,
rely
yeah,
on
yeah.
that ecosystem. So I
Mhm.
think the challenge with the AMP is really in that zone
Yeah.
of like the water to the ecosystem to people who rely on it. And
Yeah.
um,
And you're gonna have an
Yeah.
advisory board that kind of helps you with some of that. So, I think I think it's helpful to understand that that's how that feeds into your process
Mhm.
here.
We'll also develop a preliminary outline, which I think we'll come back with that, and that will also give you a chance to say, wait a minute, here's an uncertainty, here's a risk, here's a caveat,
Okay.
here's what we're planning to do, here's what's missing from this timeline and
Okay.
funding effort.
And I think that's what I heard Kira say, and which I think would be really helpful,
Yeah.
rather than going for several months down the road, feeding in both the public as well as the commission. So if you plan, my understanding, you were gonna come back in May, okay? Okay, but and then getting some feedback from, again, the public and the commission on, okay, this looks good, and then you move forward. So I think that's really helpful to sort of a more regular accountability process, so that neither of us are going too long. It's like, okay, we didn't think you were doing this, or we thought you were doing this. So,
Or is it
yeah,
all wrong?
yeah.
It's usually the case.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, this is okay. Any other?
Yeah, I have a sort of a 90,000-foot question. I like the AMP. I think that's a great process to go in. You have Waianae coming up as water management. How much of this process would you apply to that analysis?
We could take this whole, you mean the analysis for Keauhou
Well,
analogized to
the whole
Waianae?
process of AMP.
Mm, mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
Keauhou is unique, and I think it's been well described and well debated. But as you get other regional,
Mhm.
like Waianae, West Maui,
Yes.
do you have the resources, the time, and could you apply the MP process to those areas? To me, they're just as critical.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, the resources and the time are always the difficult part. We have discussed this in the context of West Maui already. And, I think it's timely to implement something like this there, given the relatively recent designation and given the
Relative pressures.
relative
Pasture.
pressures. Yes, yes. So for Waianae, I would like to apply this everywhere. I think we do need to be judicious in determining which places is most appropriate to apply them. And it is going to be a stretch with our current staffing and our current funding.
So what are the triggers to apply AMPs or to sort of remain the traditional approach?
Yeah.
So what, you went through a whole need for the Keauhou aquifer. What are sort of your triggers that will say we need to focus an AMP project on this upcoming analysis?
Yeah, I think the degree of conflict, the degree of complexity of the hydrogeology, how close we are to sustainable yield, whether we're seeing impacts on cultural resources or ecology in the area. Kind of similar stuff to what we look at when we decide if we need a deep monitor well somewhere is very similar to what we would look at for determining where adaptive management is most critically needed.
But that sounds like Waianae and West Maui.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
But what I have appreciated in this process is, because you don't have the capacity to do it on your own, is the ability to bring on board a consultant, and we can, that I think is helpful, because we just, it needs to be done. to be honest, you have West Maui designation and you have Waianae. Those are huge tasks, on staff. So, so I do want to give everybody a heads up. All of you who have permits or applying for permits, we need to amend our rules to permit us to start charging regular annual fees. So we can do regular monitoring and, accomplish a lot of these tasks, but we need to find a regular source of revenue to support, whether it's through consultants or whether it's just, technology, but I think we do need to likewise move in that direction so that you can do a lot of this, meet the needs.
Yes, Chair.
Sorry,
Okay,
one
yeah,
more
no,
question. Kira, I know offline you mentioned the possibility of a permitted interaction group to
Mhm.
support that. Is that
Yes.
still being contemplated?
It is being contemplated, and, perhaps when we come back in May, we can have a decision item on that. So I think there's a need, or at least an interest, for the commission to have more touch points on this process. And maybe, I think it would be useful to have that outside the monthly cadence of a commission meeting. So I would be interested in creating a permitted interaction group, perhaps to allow a select number of commissioners, maybe kind of a cross-section of expertise to weigh in more regularly and be more involved with the process.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I know we do have members of the public here who'd like to weigh in on this item. So if there are no other comments from the commission, I'm going to open it up first to members of the public in the boardroom. So let's see. This is item B1. I have Ashley and then I have Elena. Ashley? Thank you.
Hi, Chair and Commissioners. Ashley Obrey, on behalf of Leola Kabai. I do want to thank staff and, the deputy and staff for working on this concept. I think it's nice to see this proactive approach, moving forward. And, obviously you've seen our testimony on the other agenda items, but taking this separate, just really wanting to emphasize making comments that I think between today and this coming back to the commission, really involving community in the development of what this project description could look like. I think that would go really far. Also just transparency and process from, contracting to selection of experts, selection of all the people on the panel and that kind of thing. I think that would just really go far in, just public's trust in this process going forward. So that's really all I had on that item.
I appreciate the comment about a proactive approach. So your comment is involving the public in the process. So what you heard today, presentation on the process, why we're doing it. Peter Adler is being the consultant. What kinds of recommendations are you making to us about the process?
So I think in our testimony, we had a number of things that were still questions in terms of what the project description looked like now. But I recognize that that could change between now and it coming to the commission for some kind of decision. So I think, just between now and then, engaging, whether it's us, other members of the community. I don't exactly know what the best route is to bring other folks in, but I think there should be an opportunity. So I don't know if that means taking extra time to come back so that there is room for people to weigh in, because you wouldn't want to come back to the commission and then there's still problems. We may as well get rid of those
You have a
problems.
recommendation?
Can I add something?
yeah,
Just
sure.
because I raised those questions with Kira when this topic, when she brought this to me for suggestions last week. So it's I did ask why the compressed timeline, and it is because of the funding. So that's understandable. But I did yesterday ask about, what's the options for extending that timeline? Are there other sources of funds to allow it to not to be drawn out, but to understanding that there's a lot of trust issues to work on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, um, that has been raised. So at least from my position as a commissioner. And, but I think if there are concrete, right, and that's what Don's asking, if there are concrete suggestions on what that looks like from your end, being a little bit closer to folks on the ground, like, please, you know,
Yeah.
assuming we're not in a contested case, please do communicate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I would very much like to, you know, be able to relay our suggestions like for our hui. There might be others in the community who have thoughts as well, and I'd be open to
No,
hearing.
I take your very seriously. You come to the meetings, and I know that, and we've read your testimony, and you know, you are on the next item requesting a contested case hearing, but I would rather us be to the extent that we can incorporate some of your recommendations, or at least consider your recommendation. That to me is really important. And I don't want to wait until we come for a decision making and then there's these So however you feel most comfortable, whether you want to convey those directly to Kira
Okay.
in a constructive way, because like I said, if we consider using this regional AMP approach in the future, I'd rather get it right I'd rather get it as close to being right. And therefore, in my view, taking into consideration you and your clients' concerns are really important. I would rather deal with you in the boardroom than deal with you in court. Let me put it that way. It's generally more effective. It's cheaper. Aubrey, however you feel most comfortable, either relaying directly to Kira or putting it to the commission. But if you could communicate, and again, we will all look through your testimony again, but how your specific recommendations on community engagement. For me in particular, that's really important. I'd like to hear how you and your clients would like to be engaged.
Okay, can I, for clarification, and you're talking specifically about the plan?
The AMP, yes, the
So-
AMP.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if this becomes a model for how we look at whether it's Waianae, Maui, I mean, community engagement is a critical component to that. And if there's something we can do better from the community, and you represent in many instances, stakeholders who have not been engaged, who have felt that they don't trust us. So the more I can get a better understanding of what is a better engagement process from you guys, that would be really helpful. Okay.
And if I can add, I mean,
What is the deadline for this to be completed again? Was it September?
September, but there may be, Kira saying she may be able to find money that we can potentially
What
extend.
I'm concerned about is that this is now becoming the big, broad blueprint for everything. And we need a deadline for this specific project.
Yeah.
So at least let's keep that in mind. I
Yes.
mean, I'm all for having a great process that never has to be changed. But you know that's never gonna happen.
But I'm hoping that by the time Kira comes back to us in May, there's a maybe refined timeline too. Either we've found additional funds or there's something else, but it is a much more detailed timeline that we can look at. But I'm with you. I mean, I'm at the point of Fisher cut bait. We got to move forward some way or the other. We'll never get it totally correct, but so are we recognizing that we do have a timeline? What would some of your recommendations?
I mean, I have been in touch with Kira a little,
Okay,
so like
okay, good.
there's that aspect. I do know that the community appreciates, you folks or people being in the community,
yeah.
meeting with them in person.
Okay.
And as much as I can relay information between
yeah.
and with us and the clients, there's a lot of people I don't speak for and who
sure,
may
sure.
want to show up
Okay,
and give
okay,
comments. So if
okay.
there's room for that, but
Yeah.
I don't know how we do that in a month.
Yeah.
So.
can I ask?
Yeah.
So what I learned, not having been around in 2017 or so for designation, was that with former Deputy Cleo Manuel, there was the symposium, but there was a reason why Symposium 2 didn't happen. And that was because in consultation with Charlie Young or Apamoku, that they preferred a smaller group. Is that the kind of like what size of a group? Does it, you know, like if there are best principles, because I'll just say from the administrative side, that's not how state government usually works. So concrete, like, yeah, details, like even like where sometimes those
Yeah.
meetings are can matter.
Yeah.
I mean, not, please put forth those specific kind of, if you know them or if others have them. It's easier to incorporate now.
Yeah, and one thing I learned from Red Hill is community engagement is important. So we have had many meetings with the community, but not also often, sometimes in person, but sometimes over the internet, you know, sometimes we have those kinds of meetings. We, if those are the kinds of things that you're, for the community to feel more involved, you know, we can certainly, we've certainly learned from community engagement, and I can share that with Kira. So,
Yeah, no, it's just been my own experience. Star is better in person and it's better in a safe space. And sometimes boardroom isn't always a safe space, as well as his travel.
Yeah.
So I know that Kira them and her staff as part of the Maui, you know, water designation process, they have been going out. So, I mean, I'm very comfortable also, and I'm gonna defer to Kira and her team on how best to do that, but I do recognize at times that is the more effective way. People, and to me, we do have an obligation to the extent that we can, go out to the community that's being affected. And it may not be the board, it may not be the commission, it may be staff. And so, again, please feel free, give us your best recommendations, both on methodology, process, place, time, manner, so for our consideration. Not that we can do everything, but to the extent, because, you know, we talked about trust, and a lot of times trust comes with the good faith effort. Please know, we got a lot on the agenda, you know, on just our own plates, but to the extent, this is an important item. This sets the tone for how everything else is going to be done in Kona. So to the extent that we can try to get it as close to being right as possible, I'd appreciate any guidance you can provide us.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, do I have anybody else in this room, Jonathan? Or yes, come on.
Hi, Chair Chang, Commissioners. I am Sharika Ananoff from the Department of
That's right.
Hawaiian Homelands. I'm the Water Program Specialist.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. That was super helpful. I just wanted to emphasize that the department stands on our written testimony, and that we appreciate the opportunity to provide our comments.
So like the same question I was asking, Ashley, does DHHL have any recommendations on specifics on, in particular, community engagement?
We recently completed a final environmental assessment for a well that we're pursuing in North Kona. And included in that is a kapa'akai and mitigation measures. And we just recommend that if the staff is able to take a look at those mitigation measures and potentially include those in the AMP.
Did you provide those to Kira?
Well, the link is included in
Oh,
our
okay.
testimony. It's
Okay.
a little long to include.
Okay, no, that's okay. That's helpful. I'm sure Kira will take, her staff will take a look.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a really good kapa'akai analysis.
Great. Okay, excellent. Jonathan?
Oh my God, co-commissioners.
Oh,
For the record, Jonathan Lekeke Kishore testifying today in front of you as an individual to somebody who's been involved in Keaho designation matters and other discussions for quite a while. I guess I want to start with I think we've come so far, and I really want to thank you and Kira, to actually have the commission affirmatively bring up things like the existence of groundwater dependent ecosystems, which was a struggle to get those words stated at the start of these discussions. The fact that there's limits to the sustainable yield process, the fact that as Dr. Miike described, your public trust duties exist everywhere. Starting from that point is like, okay, the conversation has advanced, even if it seems like it's going really slow. But I want to sort of go on to a remark that you made, Chair, a little while ago, is that you don't want to reinvent the wheel in this process. And I think I want to be clear. That is exactly what the commission is trying to do here. And I think when Dr. Miike started off the discussion and said that like there were these consequences of denial of designation, you said, hey, we think we can invent a better wheel, right? So like, what's the wheel that you have in front of you, just in general, right? You have, I would start with like of the spokes of the wheel, the presumption, like you have these public trust duties everywhere. Designated or not, you still have these duties to protect public trust resources. You have a water resources protection plan that sets for groundwater sustainable yields. You have water use and development plans for islands, and in many cases, subsets of islands that help then take those principles and put them onto the ground. You have case law that guides you, and then when it's needed and you need more administrative tools, you have designation in the water use permitting process. When the commission chose to not do designation, instead try and figure out what to do differently, you grabbed a couple spokes out of the wheel and you said like, okay, but we think we can ride on this, right? And now the AMP is like, okay, maybe we can sort of put this into the wheel and we'll still be able to roll forward. We already know that, right, as good as the wheel is, there's a couple limits to the wheel. And the one polite disagreement I will have with the deputy's presentation when she said that IIF is the setting of interim in-stream flow standards is analogous to the setting of sustainable yield, is that it's actually flipped on its head. Because you fulfill your public trust duties when you set in-stream flow standards because you begin with your duty to protect public trust resources first. And then say, okay, when we've done those, how much might be available off-stream for other uses? The method by which the commission has set sustainable yields to this point has been saying, we want to determine the maximum amount we can extract first. And that's actually really what has led to some of the problem here, because you can have an impact on a groundwater dependent ecosystem with pumping well below sustainable yield if the well is close to that ecosystem and pumping hard. You could theoretically be pumping an aquifer well above sustainable yield and not actually impacting groundwater dependent ecosystems for a long time because the pumping is far away and impacting some other areas. So regarding the AMP, I think if I'm encouraged by the effort to do this, I'm concerned with the quick timeline. But I think the critical things you need to do to see if like there's a lot of hope on this, like, oh yeah, this is all jammed up and we've been riding in this car with this wheel. It's like we're going like this, right? Because like we keep hitting the ground every time it spins. So if you want this, oh, like let's jam this spoke in. I think you have to ask is like, okay, so how are the other spokes and how does it relate to these other spokes, right? So like and a metaphor to help you understand some of the comments that were made earlier. Dr. Miike asked directly, in a non-designated area, can you put conditions on other permits? That's sort of what this depends on, right? So if it's going to work, you kind of have to do that. But, right, one thing that you get in designated areas that you don't necessarily seem to get on this is that the impacts on groundwater dependent ecosystems are cumulative. So you can't address reducing pumping from a new well and expect to solve the existing impacts from existing pumping. You actually have to apply conditions on all pumping in the area. And so one important distinction between the draft adaptive management plan that was developed by the National Park Service at the request of the commission and what's being proposed here was that it's started with a presumption that said, okay, we want to maintain pumping at no greater than what's happening in these 4 Ahupua'a. And the adaptive management will be, if we're seeing changes, we will reduce pumping. To the degree I understand what is being proposed here, here's how we're going to allow additional pumping, which is a really different sort of approach and doesn't necessarily get you to what your duties are to protect public trust resources. It also doesn't deal with, like, you still have a couple tools, right? It's like a couple spokes in the wheel. You have the Water Resources Protection Plan, but it treats the whole aquifer as a single undifferentiated basal lens, which we know is not the case, right? So on a very practical level, somebody comes in for a well that they want to put in the high level or a well that they want to put in the deep confined. I don't know how an adaptive management plan is going to be able to determine what conditions you would place on it. And there's still no, despite it being committed to in 2015, updated water use and development plan for Keauhou, which would also guide how the county expands its system. So I think there could be great value in the production of an adaptive management plan, but I think there needs to be a lot of clarity and ultimately a policy decision from this body on what it is that's specifically trying to be accomplished, knowing that you have these, some spokes that are a little bit jam up, some spokes that are missing, if you're going to do it. So I just offer these comments and hope that it helps you. This is a confusing and complex issue with a long history, and hopefully my comments are just designed to help your deliberation.
Thank you. So you want you want the bike that has the water management designation. That's what you want.
So, I mean, I tend to agree with a statement Dr. Mike has made in the last two sessions, which is the entire state should be designated, which is not actually, which is something that the Review Commission on the State Water Code said 5 years after. I think you guys are in an impossible situation when you have public trust duties everywhere and only the real tools to administer the code in designated areas. That said, if you're committed to spending the resources to go down this way, do it in a way that's more likely to sort of result at least in some forward progress and success.
And I think for me, that may be the result of the AMP process, is that the outcome is we should designate this as a water management area. So I'm not totally
And I'm not here, I want to be clear, I'm not here arguing for designation.
okay.
I'm here arguing for, here's how maybe you should think about the challenges that you're facing, given the past decisions of previous water commissions.
So thanks for this. The major point that I take away is really thinking about how the AMP fits within our existing, right? Connecting it to the other spokes. How does it connect? One question I have and one thought I have is we already don't do adaptive management for climate change well. It's sort of mentioned in the Water Resource Protection Plan, but there's no thought given to how. We've had previous conversations about the fact that we chart sustainable yield as a line like that, but we know recharge is changing, so actually maybe it should be like that. But the bottom line is we could spend, and I say this coming from like climate science circles where we just talk in circles about whose model is right, and then don't do anything because we're frozen by uncertainty, is like I see adaptive management requiring us to do more sort of strategic monitoring. Although it doesn't necessarily have a place in the administrative law, regardless of whether that monitoring is for the effects of pumping or climate change, could that be useful? And where would you see that potentially fitting with your knowledge of these different spokes? I don't know if I'm being clear, but like, you know, I mean, regardless of the cause, and I just say this like with climate change, you know, like, or water resources in Hawaii, that stream flow could be declining because of rainfall decline, or it could be declining because people have paved over their, you know, or the forest has changed, but it doesn't matter. The water is decreasing. And we do need a way to respond to it, regardless of the cause. Is that something that you see the AMP could spark, but then I don't necessarily know which documents it really lives in.
Yeah, I
Thoughts
don't
on-
understand administratively in terms of law, whether it is attached as official document as an amendment to the Water Resources Protection Plan or to the, I don't understand actually. It's sort of unique authority that you're trying to exert here.
Okay.
So I will say your comment did raise for me and also from the representative from the Department of Health. Your ability, even in a designated water management area, is crude. It's to reduce pumping. Right? But there's things that can help with adaptive management of water in the area, which includes reuse and efficiency measures and other things that are outside of your control too, right? So I mean, to get to the, whether it's North Kona, Keho, or anywhere that we care about, right? We want thriving communities. We want water for new housing. We want these things to be produced. Getting to those solutions, you're part of the solution by protecting these public trust interests versus extraction. But you're going to be greatly aided if the other parts of the equation do their work, whether it's investing in recycling, whether it's investing in efficiency measures, some of which you have some authority over, I would argue, in the Water Resources Protection Plan, and particularly the approval of the county water use and development plans. That's why it's important to consider this in light of the whole wheel. Not a perfect metaphor, but maybe useful. We've all driven in those bumpy, broken down trucks on field trips, right? Where we're like banging our head on the roof. So,
Fair enough. Any other? Thank you, Jonathan.
thank you.
Is there anybody else in the boardroom that would like to make a comment on B1? Yes, please come on up. You can introduce yourself. Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, persons in the commission, I'm Randy Chu. I'm the Development Branch Chief at HHFDC. I'd like to submit testimony in support with the staff's proposal for an adaptive management plan. We believe that it's a holistic approach process to address the cultural, scientific, and public trust requirements for the state. And the AMP is really needed in order for our community and state to move forward in more. Thank you.
I appreciate the succinct testimony. Thank you so much. Thank you, Randy.
That was an April Fool joke.
Is there anybody else in the boardroom? Okay, I'm going to go on to Zoom. Raise your hand if you'd like to testify on B1. I think I had Elena Bryant that you had signed up. I'm going to take you first.
Sorry, Chair, she clarified that she's only going to be testifying on A1.
Okay, sorry. Is there anybody else on Zoom that would like to provide comments to the commission on B1? Okay, seeing no hands being raised, I'm going to close public comments at this time. And this was more of an informational briefing, right? No action to be taken.
Yes,
So,
Chair.
okay, and then my understanding is, Kira, you will be coming back, hopefully maybe in May, back to the commission on an action item.
Yes,
All right.
Chair.
All right. So with that being said, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. All right.
She was my wife's best friend.
All right, mahalo,
Nowhere to
everybody.
hide.
We are back in session. We are going to move on to item A1. And Kira? Aloha, Kako. Aloha.
So this is, as you know, an action item regarding a construction permit for Ota Well. And as has been discussed already with certain members of the commission, we have a new commissioner. She was unable to join us today just due to a scheduling conflict, even though she is, of course, eligible to start serving right away. We look forward to having the expertise of Commissioner Springer, as she is a descendant from this very island that we're discussing. I will say that she was also a participant in the original Kapakai case. And so we really value the expertise and experience that she will be able to bring to this matter. So for that reason, we are asking to withdraw this action item this morning until such a time as our new commissioner is available to weigh in.
Yeah. One comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna say that, there is no well driller, right? Yeah, and the code requires the well driller to be the applicant. So that was a hurdle to be overcome anyway.
I do appreciate the withdrawal or the deferral. I think it is important that Commissioner Springer participate in the discussion and the decision. So I suspect that there will be some who will be very disappointed that we're not pursuing this, but I also think it is an important matter before this commission, and I think it is important that she participate in that. So I appreciate everybody's sort of patience with us on that matter, but I support the deferral. But we do have a lot of people here who want to provide comments. So I am going to still permit comments to be submitted. We're going to stand by the 3 minutes if you do, so that we keep this going. Because I think it still is important that your comments will be part of the record. And Commissioner Springer, I think it would be very important to her to hear these comments as she gets brought up to speed when we do rehear the matter. So again, I don't think we need to have a, presentation on the item. It's been agendized and it's available, but I am going to take public comments on this if you want to. It doesn't preclude you from when we do take the item up that we hear the comments again. But again, please know there's no decision making on this item, okay? All right, with that being said,
May I ask clarification on this?
yes,
So this is a withdrawal and not a deferral, right?
perhaps,
And-
yeah,
and
go
the
ahead.
reason-
No,
do you want me to
yes,
come
yes, if you could,
Introduce yourself.
we know you, Linda, but maybe for the record.
I want to introduce myself.
Okay.
I'm Deputy Attorney General Linda Chow.
Okay,
And I formally am here representing HHFDC. However, I'm asking for clarification because, as you know, under the commission's rule 13-6752. That's right, okay.
Sure.
But under your process and procedure rules, that if a contested case is to be requested, it must be requested prior to the end of the public hearing, if one is required, or public to the end of a meeting at which it's on the agenda for decision making. And so if it's a withdrawal, then the time to request a contested case has not been triggered. If it's a deferral, then it may still be triggered, and if a contested case request would have to be made by the end of this meeting.
okay. No, thank you for that clarification. And I believe that First Deputy intended to say withdrawal, of this agenda
She
item.
did,
If
but
she did,
then-
okay.
then you should-
Okay, my
That's-
mistake, always go back to the first step, but thank you for that clarification. So for the record, this is a withdrawal of item A1 until such time as Commissioner Springer can participate in the discussion and decision-making.
Okay, thank you.
But no, thank you for
Well,
noting
thank
that for the record.
Uh,
Your
yeah,
client will be very pleased that you
I just want-
clarified that.
I just want clarification. So it's a withdrawal by the commission. It's not a withdrawal by the applicant.
That's
Yes.
correct, that's
Yeah.
correct. A withdrawal by the commission.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah, okay. I should just let the presenter present and not make any additional comments. I only cause confusion, but yes, thank you very much. So, but I will still take comments, because it's on the agenda, no decision. So with that being said, I do have for items A1, I have Ashley, and this is we've got sign up, and then I've got others. Ashley, Charles Young, Keith Okamoto, Wendy LaRosse, Elena Bryant. So I'll take those first, and then I will take the additional list. So Ashley, do you have anything else you want to add?
I have the withdrawal, just stand on it.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, Charlie, are you, Charles Young? Did you want to add?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you for this opportunity to provide some testimony on A1. And pardon my confusion for the state of where we are now in terms of decision making. But I did want to just put on the record. It was I participated in the Ahamoku facilitation in the in the original application for the permit and the conditions that were put on there. I want the commissioners to appreciate that. I'm also was part of the litigation with Kapa'akaioka Aina in 2000 on the Kapa'akai analysis decision. And I am so pleased about the robust discussion that went on in the previous item. To this item, if you notice in some of the, and to to reference Mr. Shawer's comments about about some of the sort of decision making and uses that lie outside the commission, we look to the commission as sort of like the first clearinghouse and one that has probably the most authority and in terms of determining our water usage, the use of the public trust. But there's a lot of things going on downstream. If you look at some of the conditions in the first application, the April 22nd, I think it's 2022, we asked that water not be wasted and is used efficiently as possible. These are county jurisdictional areas, and we've worked with the county. Ahamoku has been working with the county to address some of those. I'm also on the county action committee. I'm not speaking on their behalf, but this is for the Kona Development Plan. There have been numerous meetings where water comes up in our discussions, and there are many residents who are concerned that additional drawdown on the water is not just a sustainable yield issue, it's a usage issue, because we do not do a good job of conservation. We do not do a good job of remediating the water. In our suggestion, we also suggested that the county upgrade its wastewater treatment from RS2 to RS1 because the water's being returned, and it's been found in the nearshore waters. It's been detected in untreated. So it's a concern that if more permits for drilling and for water consumption and for use, if it's not, the usage is not mitigated either through conservation or through better wastewater treatment plans, then the community is really concerned about that additional drawdown. And so I thought that would be something relevant, although it's outside of perhaps your jurisdiction. One of the things that you might consider in conditions going forward is that the county also commit to Kapa'akai analysis in its decision-making downstream. I see my time's up.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much, Charlie. I appreciate that. And the matter's been withdrawn, so there'll be an opportunity for you guys to provide specific comments at that time. But thank you. Your comments create a segue to Keith Okamoto.
Hi, actually, no comments. I'm just
Okay.
participating. Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Next I have is Wendy Laros.
Aloha, Chair Chang and the Commission on Water Resource Management. My name is Wendy Laros. I'm the President and CEO of the Kona Kohala Chamber of Commerce. Since our establishment in 1968, our chamber has worked to enhance the quality of life for our community through a strong, sustainable economy on Hawaii Island. With over 460 member businesses and organizations, our mission is to provide leadership and advocacy for a successful business environment in West Hawaii. Water development and housing are top priorities for the Kona Kohala Chamber. We strongly support freshwater resource development, maintenance, and protection in West Hawaii, and we encourage streamlining government regulation to provide predictability for development. Furthermore, we support housing projects at all inventory levels and the necessary infrastructure to develop more housing. We strongly support the development of the Ota Well in West Hawaii as it aligns with our priorities. This well will supply water to the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation's Kamakana villages. Upon completion, the plan is that there will be 1,600 affordable housing units. This is desperately needed in our community. The Natural Energy Lab of Hawaii Authority will also receive water credits to complete the build out of the Hawaii Ocean Science and Technology Park. And this is where research, education, and innovation come together and provides economic diversity to our region. We are confident this new water source will significantly improve our community's well-being. We appreciate the Commission's attention to this important West Hawaii water resource and look forward to a positive outcome. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Next is Elena Bryant.
Sorry. Aloha. For the record, I'm Elena Bryant here on behalf of Earth Justice. I was intending to testify in opposition to item A1, but at this time I just want to thank Deputy Kahahane and the Commission for withdrawing this matter until Commissioner Springer is available. I'll just briefly state some of the concerns that we have about the recommendation to approve a well construction permit prior to assessing and understanding impacts on groundwater dependent ecosystems and therefore on cultural practices, which we believe would be a blatant violation of this Commission's constitutional duties. We also have concerns about replacing permit conditions that were previously put in place to mitigate impacts on trust purposes, as this would be bad precedent and would seriously erode public trust and confidence in the process. Lastly, without an updated water use and development plan and water resource protection plan that considers updated recharge rates, we feel that this would be poor planning. Under the water code, we need this critical information in order for the Commission to be able to adequately address future water development and resource protection issues. Otherwise, we'll reserve our comments and testimony until this matter is brought back to the Commission for decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Stephanie Sang. Oh, no, you're with you. Okay. Thank you, sir. Albert, did you want
to say whatever you want?
Oh, that's me.
Here to listen. Good, good. Albert, did you want to say anything? No, okay. Similarly, Stan Fujimoto. Okay. Michelle Leon. Okay, very good. So let's see. Okay, come on, share. And then I'll take more people from Zoom afterwards.
Welcome, Chair, and Commissioners, Department of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Thank you. Sheree Khan and all with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We stand on our written testimony and we look forward to participating in any productive discussion that can occur before it comes back. Thank you.
No, thank you. Jonathan, did you want to add anything? Okay, no, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us today. With that being said, I see Kapua, are you here for A1? Is there like, can we unmute her, or Kapua, can you unmute yourself?
It's also possible that she may not actively be
At the
on
computer.
the app on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Then, I see Kay Inaba. Okay. What about Chico? Chico, are you? Okay. Sarah, Kavika Uehara, anything you want to add?
No testimony, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah Agnew Miller?
Oh,
You have to unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm with Stanford Car Development. I don't have any current testimony, just listening in on both A1 and B1.
Thank you very much. I think those are the only other two besides Kapua and Kay Inaba. All right, no action item. So I am good. Is there anybody else here who wants to provide a comment? Okay, and again, we have withdrawn this item. So please look out for our agenda when it may be called back onto the agenda. The next item on the agenda is announcements, Kira.
Aloha ho. Only one announcement for today, which is that on April 7th, which is next Monday, we will be at Lahaina Luna High School's cafeteria with commission staff to talk about Lahaina's water resources, the water use permitting process, how that's going, and anticipated revisions to sustainable yield. Some people are asking me, are you going to say what you're going to change sustainable yields to? The answer is no. We're going to talk about the process for revising sustainable yields. So so this will not be live streamed. It'll be in person, and we'll post the recording on our website after the fact. And this is leading up to our April 28th meeting, which will be in Lahaina. And our next meeting after that is tentatively May 20th, 2025.
All right. With
That meeting on the 7th, what time does it start and how long do you think it would go on?
It's from 5 to 7 p.m.
Right.
That's when we have it. Yes, we're catching the last flight out that day. So
Good luck.
Sometime
Hope there's no traffic.
Yeah, I hope there's no traffic too.
This
can sleep at your house.
So this is commission staff.
Yes.
So I guess commissioners are, so yeah, Paul, if you're there, if anybody wants to attend, no more than two
Two.
commissioners, please.
I'm trying to get there, but I'll stay.
Okay,
far
incognito,
away.
right?
Oh.
Yeah, right, we can't talk.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so with that, so if anybody's here, please, those of you also on Zoom, if you want to attend April 7th at Lahaina Luna High School, 5 to 7, April 7th, but we will and actually our meeting on April 28th will be in Lahaina.
Yes,
So
Chair.
please do not come to this boardroom on April 28th.
Please come to the Lahaina Civic Center on April 28th. We'll be starting at 9:30,
At
little
9:30.
later than usual because
Okay.
folks have to come in that morning.
We are planning a full day for that meeting. We are anticipating robust discussion.
Yes, we are.
Robust discussion. Okay, with that being said, having no other business before the commission, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 11:01. Mahalo, everybody.